A young duke reclines on a mound of velvet cushions, shafts of sunlight slicing through tall mullioned windows. A servant holds out a goblet of spiced wine. The heady scent drifts across polished stone. Outside, fountains gleam in a dewy garden. Inside, laughter trickles from distant corridors. Then, a sudden jolt of pain erupts in his side. He tastes iron on his tongue. He tries to rise, but finds his body refuses. His heart hammers wildly, each beat a wrenching reminder of his frailty. The corridors grow silent. Attendants freeze in mid-step. A distant bell tolls once, twice. He feels the world tilt. Each breath burns. He sinks back as the cushions shift beneath him. The pain sharpens until it is all he knows, until it drags him under. Henry FitzRoy opens his small eyes to candlelight on June 15, 1519. Soft beeswax flames dance on polished oak panels in the Queen's private chamber at Hampton Court. Midwives murmur prayers as his first cry echoes against cold stone. Elizabeth Blount, his mother, clutches the sheets with relief shining in her eyes. Behind a velvet curtain, King Henry VIII watches in rare stillness, pride softening his usual stern gaze. From the first moment, FitzRoy breathes privilege. He is swaddled in linen finer than air, laid in a cradle carved with the Tudor rose. Servants move in hushed unison, tending to his every whim. His world is immediate comfort, swatches of silk draped across nursery walls, carpets soft underfoot, pillows piled high so each nap feels like floating on clouds. Lullabies sung by gentle voices drift through corridors, the scent of lavender and beeswax weaving through the air. By 6 months, he coos over wooden toys painted in bright hues. At first steps, he totters across thick rugs, hand in hand with a nurse, laughter ringing brighter than trumpets. He wears a tiny gold badge stamped with his father's arms, his first mark of royal favor. At breakfast, he sips warmed almond milk from a porcelain cup. At dinner, he tastes honey-glazed meats carved at the high table. Music swells in the great hall as minstrels tune lutes and fiddles. Dancers glide across marble floors in gowns that whisper secrets of silk and thread. A tutor arrives daily, Master Thomas, opening leather-bound volumes of Latin fables. FitzRoy sits on a cushion, reciting Amicus and Virtues, as if they were his own name. By age 4, he rides a pony through palace courtyards. His small hands grip reins, eyes bright with wonder as gulls wheel overhead. He hears the clip-clop of hooves on cobblestones, feels the press of breeze against his cheeks. Return to the chambers brings applause from courtiers, who murmur of the king's promise in his son's gaze. Yet even amid adoration, subtle currents swirl. Courtiers exchange glances over goblets of spiced wine. Advisors whisper that this boy, born out of wedlock, could only rise so far. But Henry VIII speaks plainly. He is mine. At nights, when shadows drape chambers in silent velvet, FitzRoy sleeps soundly, unaware of power and danger woven into every tapestry. To him, the world is soft laughter and warm linen, a world that will crack beneath him in ways he cannot yet imagine. By 7 years old, FitzRoy holds court of his own. Pages and doublets bring him letters sealed with bright crimson wax. He breaks them with a carved ivory knife and reads by torchlight, absorbing every word with keen interest. Gentlemen ushers adjust his cloak of emerald velvet before he appears at the gallery steps. He feels the thrill of attention, guards stepping aside, ladies curtsying, noblemen waiting for his command. At dawn, he rides Mercury, his gray stallion, out through palace gates. His master of the horse leads the way through dew-slick grass. The world opens into fields bordered by oak and birch. He grips reins as Mercury canners, wind tugging at his cloak. Under a canopy of leaves, he practices ring tilting. Lance in hand, he aims at a small loop hanging from a branch. When the lance slides clean through, he laughs, a clear, ringing sound that echoes among birdsong. Return to the palace finds him in a tent, pitched on the lawn, a tutor at his side, drilling him in rhetoric. FitzRoy stands before local gentry and recites lines from Cicero. Applause rustles like wind through autumn leaves. He bows, cheeks flushed with pride. A feast follows. Silvery slices of roast venison, bowls of sweet prunes cooked with sugar from far-off lands, golden goblets of mead spiced with cloves. Musicians thread lilting pipes and drums around the laughter of guests, yet behind every smile lies ambition. Courtiers bow with eyes flicking to the king's favored son, not for friendship, but for advantage. Gentlemen murmur about land grants and military commands bound to FitzRoy's title. They speak of marrying daughters to the Duke's household, of raising alliances by shared feasts. FitzRoy, still a child, senses their eagerness, but cannot grasp the true weight of their intent. For him, these days are a tapestry of bright threads, games, feasts, lessons, stitched across a perfect sky. But palace walls absorb secrets as easily as torchlight. Each evening, when he returns to a suite of rooms scented with lavender sachets, he finds attendants whispering in corners. They still press gentle food to his lips, cold porridge, slices of boiled veal, but their eyes are wary. In the shadows, uncertainty flickers. For all the privilege cradled in silk, FitzRoy's world teeters on the edge of unseen currents, waiting to pull him under. Before we move on, we want to thank you for listening. We really like making these videos and would highly appreciate it if you subscribe to our channel. Thank you. Let's move on. Spring of 1533 marks a turning point. At age 14, FitzRoy kneels on polished marble in the Grand Hall of Whitehall. Trumpets blare with silvered notes that linger in the vaulted ceiling. Henry VIII steps forward, a cloth of gold mantle in his hand. He drapes the heavy fabric over FitzRoy's shoulders. The mantle's gleam catches torchlight, throwing rays across high-arched windows. He rises to his feet, crown of cloth of gold circling his brow. Applause sweeps through assembled peers, like wind through reeds. Anne Boleyn, newly crowned queen, inclines her head, her pearls glinting against black velvet. Thomas Cromwell stands nearby, gaze steady and unreadable. In that instant, alliances shift. FitzRoy becomes Duke of Richmond and Somerset. Lands, income, and command over troops flow into his coffers. His household doubles, then triples, as gentlemen jockey for position. Each new retainer arrives bearing gifts, tapestries, horses, fine cloth. The dukedom shines like a jewel on his breast, yet the title brings weight. FitzRoy soon learns that every dinner speech, every stroll in the garden, carries political resonance. Noble guests at his banquets murmur of marriage prospects, diplomatic missions, and military campaigns. Courtiers who once bowed eagerly now measure their words, testing his mood. At dawn, he practices falconry. A hawk perches on his gauntlet, leather hood removed so its dark eyes shine with intelligence. He feels the bird's talons grip his glove, strong, insistent. He throws meat into the air and watches it rise in graceful arcs. The hunt should feel free, but even here, he senses observers mapping his strengths and weaknesses. Back in his chamber, lessons continue. He reads history, theology, and law. Tutors speak of kings and emperors, of Florence and Rome. He imagines himself a sovereign, shaping nations with pen and sword. Yet when he speaks, his voice still carries a boy's tremor. He practices speeches before a mirror, adjusting posture, rehearsing tones. He tastes the thrill of power, but also the ache of doubt. Each night, in the hush of his bedchamber, he wonders whether he can live up to the mantle draped on his shoulders. At a feast to mark the dukedom, minstrels play beneath colored banners. A dozen dishes arrive in sequence: sweetmeats, spiced fowl, peacock's tail, sugar sculptures. He lifts a twisted confection and tastes sugar's pure burn. Wine warms his tongue. Courtiers toast him as future hope of England, yet their eyes flicker with ambition. He laughs, but a shadow lingers at the edge of the hall. In that moment, he feels the first tremor of fear. That favor can be stripped as swiftly as it is given. At 15, FitzRoy's household swells further. He is betrothed to Lady Mary Howard in a private ceremony at Hampton Court's chapel. Candlelight shivers on stone walls. He kneels before her in a gown of midnight blue trimmed with pearls. She curtsies, ring exchanged with solemn grace. Family banners hang overhead, silk playing across carved angels on the ceiling. A choir's Latin motet echoes through the nave. After vows, they attend a feast in the adjoining hall. Lady Mary's laughter is like wind chimes. FitzRoy offers her sugared almonds from a gilded dish. She smiles, revealing pearly teeth. They speak of ponies and dogs, and futures bright as day. In those utterances lies comfort. Two young people, clutching moments of simple joy amid the machinery of politics. Minstrels fill the air with strains of lute and viol. A jester tumbles at their feet, silver bells jingling. FitzRoy's cloak brushes the floor as he stands to applaud. For a moment, the world reduces to warmth and laughter. But as candles gutter low, FitzRoy feels the hush that follows pomp. Courtiers drift away to whisper in side chambers. He hears rumors of alliances forged in secret, alliances that may bypass both him and Mary. Guards flank corridors, faces stern. FitzRoy and Mary retreat to their chambers, footsteps echoing on marble. They clasp hands in silence. He tastes fear on his tongue, that even this bond might be a thread in a tapestry woven by others. In private lessons, tutors speak of dynasties and papal courts. FitzRoy pores over maps of France and Spain, imagines himself envoy to distant lands, yet each ambition is tempered by the knowledge that his fate depends on the king's favor. At night, he writes lines in a small diary, rare glimpses of a boy's heart beneath layers of duty. He describes Mary's laughter and Mercury's gallop, the hush when court alliances shift unseen. He writes of dreams where trumpet calls fade into shadows and silk turns to ashes underfoot. In chapel, he kneels beside Mary before a stone altar. Smoke from incense coils upward. The choir's voices rise in clouds. FitzRoy closes his eyes, resting his head on folded arms. He prays for strength to match his title's weight. He prays for Mary's happiness in a world ruled by crowns and contracts. He prays for a future where laughter might outshine politics, though already he senses how thin such hopes can be. In early spring of 1535, FitzRoy joins a dawn hunt in Richmond Park. Mist clings to grass like gossamer veils. He wears a velvet doublet, horsehair breeches, boots laced tight. Mercury canners beneath him, nostrils flaring. The world feels new. Birds trill in hawthorn bushes. Fresh buds peek through mossy bark. A sudden shower drenches riders. He shivers in sodden clothing. Dismissed from the hunt, he returns to his lodgings through winding lanes of damp cobblestones. That night, fever grips him. He lies swathed in woolen blankets drawn tight under canopy. His skin burns. A doctor arrives, Master Roper, tinctures in hand. He feels FitzRoy's pulse, pronounces the standard remedy, bloodletting. Dark streams spill into a pewter bowl. The iron scent saturates the chamber. FitzRoy tastes it on his lips. He drifts between fevered dreams and waking hours, each as unsettling as the other. Shadows flicker as torches burn low. He hears priests chanting psalms for the dying, pages slipping in to adjust blankets, ladies in waiting holding damp cloths to his brow. Courtiers murmur beyond closed doors. The Duke is changed. Anne Boleyn sends lilies in a gilt vase. Thomas Cromwell dispatches letters, urged patience. King Henry visits each dawn, voice grave. "How stands our son?" he asks. FitzRoy forces a nod, throat raw. Henry's hand rests heavy on his shoulder, then slips away in silence. Within days, his world shrinks to a narrow chamber. He tastes no meat, only thin broth and water drawn from chipped cups. Sleep evades him. Nightmares of corridors filled with shadows, footsteps closing in, distant laughter dissolving into whispers. He clutches his bedpost, knuckles white. Each breath sears his lungs. He tries to speak, but only a croak emerges. He writes in his diary when strength flickers. Observations of dream-caught shapes, the echo of a hawk's cry. He ties a lock of hair around the page as a token, both keepsake and plea for memory. Outside, the court trembles. In council chambers, men pause mid-debate to catch a breath. Factions reopen old disputes. Those who champion reform position themselves to gain if FitzRoy falters. Those who oppose Boleyn's influence hope his death will strengthen their hand. Courtiers who once vied for a place at the Duke's table now keep distance. They curtsy from afar, eyes measuring whether favor still smiles. The halls hum with tension that FitzRoy feels even in delirium. One night, delirium peaks. He dreams of a grand feast where tables collapse under the weight of silver platters, of Anne Boleyn's crown toppling into darkness, of his own reflection in a tarnished mirror, eyes sunken, a blade at his throat. He wakes to the taste of iron on his tongue. He prays for morning and for mercy. News of FitzRoy's worsening condition ricochets through Whitehall. Courtiers once inseparable from the Duke now triangulate alliances behind closed doors. Thomas Cromwell sees opportunity. He presses hard in council for measures that wrest the church further from Rome, hoping to cement his reforms before Henry's heart breaks over his son. Anne Boleyn watches each move with cautious calculation. She must protect her own influence if FitzRoy fails to recover. In the council chamber, arguments flow over treaties and taxes, but every pause, every cough, draws eyes to the portal. Ministers exchange glances, weighing the future. If FitzRoy dies, who will inherit his vast lands? Which noble house will claim those revenues? Which faction will rise? The buzzing hum of politics grows louder than any herald's trumpet. At courtly gatherings, FitzRoy's vacant seat at the dais stands as an unspoken symbol. Upper benches once carved for his retinue now gather dust. Tapestries in the great hall seem to sag, as if weighed down by sorrow. At evening feasts, guests murmur to one another about the precarious balance of power. Some toast to the health of the realm, others to the king's wisdom. All hint at the same question: what becomes of England if the Duke dies? In private corners, letters travel by courier, coded pleas from foreign ambassadors, each seeking favor regardless of outcome. The French envoy writes of offering estates in Brittany to secure local support should FitzRoy's line fail. Spanish diplomats promise military aid in exchange for lands near Calais. Within weeks, European capitals buzz with speculation. FitzRoy, half delirious, senses the hush beyond his chamber door. He hears distant clinks of wine goblets, the muted laughter of nobles celebrating triumphs he cannot share. He tastes bitterness in every breath, as if power itself has turned to thorns in his mouth. He dreams of corridors that stretch endlessly, lit by torchlight that never fades, footsteps echoing but never arriving. He reaches for the wall, searching for comfort in cold stone. One dawn, a messenger arrives with a letter sealed in black wax, the king's command for prayers in every chapel. He must be buried with full honors should the worst occur. FitzRoy's lips part in a weak smile. Even in fevered haze, he understands the weight of that instruction. To be remembered as royalty even in death, such is the paradox of his life. On a pale morning in July 1536, FitzRoy lies strapped to his bed, each breath a labor. Sweat beads on his brow. He tastes ashes in the air. A priest kneels beside him, reading from a psalter. Domine, ad adjuvandum me festina. The Latin words tumble over his mind like stones, but he whispers, Amen. Bits of ash from the candle smoke drift onto the page. Mary Howard slips into the chamber, her mourning cloak trailing behind. Her dark veil parts as she kneels, pressing her cheek to his hand. Her tears soak the cuff of his sleeve. He tries to smile, an effort that twists his lips. She whispers his name. He squeezes her fingers once, the last spark of warmth in his failing body. Beyond the shuttered window, dawn tinges the sky pink. A lone bird's song drifts through damp air. FitzRoy's eyes flicker to the high ceiling's beams, then close. He dreams of gardens, fountains dancing, birds fluttering among blooms. He hears his own laughter echoing against hedges, trimmed into shapes of kings and queens. Then the laughter fades, swallowed by silence. A servant brings a last sip of water. FitzRoy drinks, tasting cold stone on the rim. He shifts, groaning as pain wells in his chest. The doctor, Master Roper, enters with shaking hands. He checks the pulse and lowers his head. FitzRoy opens his eyes one final time, meets the doctor's gaze, then turns his face to the ceiling. He places one hand over his heart. He breathes once more, then no more. Silence floods the chamber. The priest crosses himself. Mary gasps and bows her head. Torches flicker low. The hush carries farther than a king's command. The life that began with trumpets ends in a small room with only candlelight for witness. Word travels swiftly. Courtiers halt mid-step in hallways. Guards lower banners to half-staff. Henry VIII's council adjourns in abrupt disarray. The king retreats behind tapestry in his private gallery, hidden from all but his closest. Rumors swirl. He's gone. The Duke is dead. What will follow? Anne Boleyn stands at a window overlooking the Thames, candlelight reflecting in her eyes. She grips the sill until her knuckles whiten. She turns away, pressing a hand to her mouth. Thomas Cromwell awaits her in antechamber, his posture taut. They exchange no words, but his gaze carries plans. Reform must push forward. The tide must not break now. A funeral is arranged in haste at St. George's Chapel, Windsor Castle. Black hearses with wrought iron fittings roll through silent streets. Lanterns sway at corners. Noble mourners, heads bowed, follow on foot. Mary Howard walks at the front, her veil trailing. No sound escapes her lips. Rings chime on her fingers, the only note in a procession of grief. In the chapel, FitzRoy's body lies in state on a bier of black oak. White linen shrouds him. His ducal coronet rests upon folded hands. Candles circle the bier in solemn vigil. Choir boys in white surplices chant a dirge so quiet it seems a prayer whispered to the stones. Courtiers file past, laying wreaths of lilies and roses. Their faces are masks of sorrow and calculation. They note each other's presence, aware that the Duke's lands and titles will soon be theirs to claim. Henry VIII arrives by litter, hood drawn low. He kneels at the sanctuary rail, voice thick with emotion as he intones the Lord's Prayer. He presses his forehead to the stone. Courtiers watch, uncertain whether to offer comfort or to seize advantage in the king's grief. When the final chant fades, the coffin is lowered into a vault beneath the floor. Chains clink as they secure the lid. A final prayer. Then the chapel doors close with echoing finality. In the weeks that follow, Whitehall hums again, but with a different note. Factions solidify. Thomas Cromwell leverages the Duke's passing to advance church reforms. Anne Boleyn's position strengthens, though whispers of her own fall begin anew. Mary Hagrid retreats from court, taking residence in her family's northern estates. She writes occasional letters to the king, each one a faint plea for memory. Land commissions are issued to settle FitzRoy's estates. Foreign envoys submit petitions to claim newly vacant grants. French ambassadors hope to secure holdings near Calais. Spanish envoys eye English wool revenues. Each petition arrives sealed with gilded wax, the names of petitioners heralded in council. The treasury calculates income lost and gained. The court calendar fills with ceremonies marking the Duke's memory. Masses, alms distributed to the poor, grants made in his name. Yet under every charitable act lies ambition. In corridors once hushed for FitzRoy's passage, ministers now press for audience with the king. They speak of marriage alliances long deferred. They ask for new titles and lands to honor services rendered to the late Duke. Henry grants some requests, denies others with terse notes. He remains cloistered, his features drawn and pale. When he emerges, he moves through crowds without greeting. The hush follows him. Courtiers bow and hurry past. In private letters, Mary Howard mourns deeply. She describes dreams where FitzRoy's laughter ripples through hedges, where he beckons her toward a distant fountain. She ends one missive, begging the king to remember the boy whose heart beat with love for England. Henry replies with thanks and a promise to ensure FitzRoy's memory endures. Yet in the king's heart lies a colder resolve to move on. If you came this far, click the next video on the screen now. Subscribe to stay with us as we explore more dark turns of history.